Thank you all for coming. This is the last event in our Navarre Open Gaetz Day. We started at 8 this morning with some wonderful students at Holly Navarre Intermediate School. Afterwards, we got the chance to go onto Hurlburt Field and thank the incredibly dedicated professionals who are helping with child development and youth centers for military families as we have more and more rapid deployments, making sure that we always highlight the family as essential to the readiness of the warfighter is something I work on in Congress, and it was just remarkable to see the great work that was happening there. The Navarre Rotary Club hosted us for lunch. That was very special. We also had the chance to go out and have a roundtable meeting with some of the owners and visitors and guests on Navarre Beach. We also went to the sea turtle sanctuary, an area where sea turtles are rehabilitated with a real focus on some of the fantastic conservation efforts that are happening here. And now I'm very eager to have our town hall meeting. And so thank you for joining us. If you've not come to one of these town hall meetings before, the way that we do it so that there's no concern about me just picking folks who agree with me to ask questions or make comments is if you've gotten one of these red tickets, I'll be calling the numbers on these to have people ask their question. We only have the one microphone, and so I'll call two numbers. That way, if you're the next one, you can be sort of close to the stage, and I'll give you the opportunity to speak into the microphone so that everyone can hear the question and so that I'll have an opportunity to provide a response. Not everything has to be a question. Matter of fact, there are no rules other than we would hope that while someone is speaking, that we give that person respect so that we can hear their viewpoint and hear it out. At town halls, if this is anything like the others I've hosted, not everyone here agrees with me. And you know what? I think that that's the sign of a vibrant democracy. I think that we should live in a society where people who agree or disagree should have the right to show up, make their viewpoint heard, to be respected, and to be listened to. So I would simply ask that everyone here abide by that and just treat folks as we would always want to make sure Northwest Floridians are treated. So enough from me. I want to go ahead and start calling out our tickets. Our first number, and by the way, if you want to ask a question or make a comment and you've not received a red ticket, just raise your hand and a member of our staff will come provide one and then dump them into the bucket for me so that you can get into the queue. So just raise your hand and our staff members will come see you. Great, so our first question is going to be from last three numbers 116. And then after last three numbers 116 will be 114. So two people that may have come in at the same time. 116, please step forward. Yes, ma'am. Come on right ahead. And 114 will be next. We want everyone to see you, so step into the light.
Thank you. My name is Gail Smith, and I'm a resident of Navarre. I live on the island. And my question for you is, we understand now why the pass cannot be open on this side of the island. Why can the path not be open on this side?
Great question. And first, let me say, if you're unfamiliar with the Navarre Pass, I'm a supporter of the Navarre Pass. I would like to see the economic potential of Santa Rosa County unlocked with a pass. I think there's a strong environmental argument to be made for the pass. The challenge is that there are certain authorities that we need in the pass's current location from the military. And there are certain military capabilities that we have on Okaloosa Island and on this entire island system, which are very unique in all of the military. And we always put the military first in Northwest Florida. So the question is appropriately, why can't we just simply go to the other side? Here's the answer. Environmentally, if you are reopening an existing pass or an existing waterway that existed previously, you don't have to go through the same environmental impact studies and some of the multi-year red tape. And you also don't have to deal with some of the really hairy property rights questions because that's never been used as a pass. And it can be faster to reopen a pass that has existed previously. So we don't say we want to dig a Navarre Pass, we want to reopen a Navarre Pass, and we hope that that will be productive. The other thing is that there's no indication that the military would have a different viewpoint if the pass were a mile or so down the road. Their concern is that increased boat traffic along this entire causeway would impair their training mission and the research, test, and development mission, which are very important. And we've got to find ways with more military infrastructure in other parts of North Florida to to replicate those capabilities so that we can have a path forward on the pass. The good news is money isn't really a question. We have $300 million in the bank today with another $1.2 billion to come over the next 30 years that has to be used on infrastructure for economic development, and there is no infrastructure for economic development that makes a stronger case, in my opinion, than the Navarre Pass. So our next person is 114, and following that will be 106. Let's shake these up a little bit.
Make sure I get the ticket so that you know it's me.
I trust you.
Well, thank you, Congressman, for letting me be here. My name is John King. I'm a resident in the area. You voted to pass, and we're very enthusiastic about the Tax Act bill that was passed by the House recently. And in it, it does create some tax advantages for a number of individuals. But one of the things it also does is that it does increase the standard deduction for individuals, almost doubles it for families, but at the same time, it repeals the personal exemption. It also does takes away other deductions that many people often use and limits the number of deductions for people use to lower their tax bill. It's almost a wash when you look at it. One of the things that's also in here that's very interesting, it repeals the Work Opportunity Tax Credit, which is a federal tax credit for employers who hire and retain veterans and others who need employment. My question is, you have a reason for why you did what you did, and people here are going to be affected by what you did. Please explain why there is not as simple a process and a simple answer that everyone's going to get money, that there's not going to be a Christmas gift for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Tax bill's gotten a lot of attention and been in the news a lot lately. As I think Mr. King correctly stated, the organizing principle of the tax bill is to have fewer individual deductions that you got to pay some accountant to go find for you and process for you, and then you hope that you get value in the deduction that's more than your compliance costs. Have fewer of those, and then just let people keep more of their own money in the first place by increasing the standard deduction. There's no debate about the fact that if we did that system, there would be, as Mr. King correctly pointed out, some deductions for some people that would go away that are currently used. The hope is that it would be better than a wash because the average American would see an increase in the amount of money that they would be able to keep. I think there's still work to do on this tax bill. I'm glad that as the bill moved through committees, there were a couple of deductions that we got back in. One that I care a lot about is the adoption tax credit to make things a little easier for a family that adopts. You mentioned one that's very popular in this area, and that is the deduction people get for hiring veterans. I've asked a few of the major employers around here about how that might impact them, and I got to tell you, no one has ever said to me that the reason they hire a veteran is because of the deduction. Now, none are eager to give it back. They certainly like to have it, but the principal reason to hire a veteran in Northwest Florida is the skill set that the veterans bring to bear. That's one of the reasons why FLIR, DRS Technologies, Lockheed Martin, and a number of other contractors are increasing their manufacturing footprint in Northwest Florida because they see the value of the workforce. So I don't think the soup is fully cooked. I think there's still deductions that may work their way in or work their way out. I think there's probably still negotiating room on the overall rate. But if we get to a system where 9 out of every 10 Americans can fill out their taxes on a postcard or on a mobile app or easily on a website, I think that's a lot better than a 70,000-page tax code where you got to pay some accountant to comb through it and tell you what you earned or didn't earn. I like the idea of starting by letting people just keep more of their own money in the first place. Here's what I think was the great sin of this tax bill. We didn't accompany it with spending cuts. And so I fear that this tax bill could drive up the deficit and further contribute to generational theft. That's wrong. The budget that the Senate passed to pave the way for this tax bill I voted against, because I think if you want to cut taxes, you need to cut spending, not later, not with a promise that it'll happen in the future, but right now. And we proposed a budget in the House, I serve on the Budget Committee, that does cut spending. Unfortunately, that was rejected by the Senate. So the ultimate question, when the final product has gone through the Senate, has gone through a conference with the House and Senate, is at the end of the day, are regular folks going to be able to have more money in their own pocket? If they do, I won't hold taxpayers hostage to Washington's spending problems, but I do believe that we've got to be equally as enthusiastic about spending cuts as we are about tax cuts. And if at the end of the day it is only a wash and people don't get to keep more of their money, then I won't vote for it. But I have every expectation that the roadmap and the principles that President Trump has laid out will be followed, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get that done. We don't have the greatest record in the 115th Congress in actually getting things done, and so I'd like to maybe reverse course. Sometimes we do our best work when expectations are lowest, and that's what we face now. Number 106 is our next number, and after 106 we will have 110. Great, thank you. Good to see you again.
Congressman, actually my question I think is a good follow-up for that, because it's concerning the fact that you get a much better economic boost by increasing a livable wage rather than giving bonuses to the wealthy.
Woohoo!
Because when people have a living wage, they actually have some disposable income that they can then inject into the economy and build the economy and create more jobs than giving bonuses to wealthy people who, we found out from the Paradise Papers, just take that money offshore and hide it and squirrel it away someplace where they're not going to pay any taxes on it.
Woohoo!
So my question for you, Congressman, can you please commit to co-sponsoring H.R. 122, the original Living Wage Act of 2017, or join 166 of your colleagues in co-sponsoring H.R. 15, the Raise the Wage Act? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. It's absolutely correct that we do need rising wages in this country. One of the great problems over the last 8 years is that while the stock market did a little bit better, and while insurance companies did a little bit better, and some big businesses did a lot better, regular folks didn't see more money in their paycheck. And so we got to see that happen. So there's no disagreement about that being the measurement that we have to gauge ourselves by. So then the question becomes, what's the best way to get there? I don't believe that the government telling people what they got to pay folks is ultimately the best thing for our economy. So I won't be able to commit to co-sponsoring that legislation. I oppose that legislation because every major economist who's looked at raising minimum wages, particularly as those bills would do, to $15 an hour, ends up costing jobs. There's no one who doesn't concede the fact that fewer people will get hired. If you look at jurisdictions that have embraced this solution set, you've seen fewer people employed in entry-level jobs. And then if you don't get an entry-level job, you can't demonstrate your skills and move up. My first job was at a lunch counter. I think I made $4.85 an hour working that lunch counter, and was happy to have that job because then I could show a future employer that I was reliable and showed up on time. So I just think that we've got to find out a way to get the economy moving again. Here's what I think is a better plan. By cutting the corporate tax rate from one of the highest in the world into the competitive middle of the road, by bringing trillions of dollars in cash and other assets back to the United States instead of having them housed overseas, we can actually move this economy. Now, we were told by the last administration that we would never have economic growth over 2%, that on a melded rate, that's what we had to expect. Well, in the first quarter of the Trump presidency, we saw growth around 3%. And so I think that if we continue the policies of a sound regulatory climate, a simple tax system, and we don't create incentives to drive jobs overseas, I think we can see rising wages. I mean, more and more now, because of our tax system, companies are housing their intellectual property in Ireland or in the United Kingdom because they have lower corporate tax rates. What does that mean? More white-collar jobs being sent overseas and less commercialization of research and manufacturing and blue-collar jobs in the United States. I think that's a better approach, and the legislation you referenced is not legislation I could support.
Corporate welfare.
So,
welfare.
Next, was that 106? Do we have 110 next? Did we do that one already? Oh, great. On ahead, and let me get the next one in the queue. Shake this up a little. 111. Perfect. That's how it goes sometimes.
Congressman, I'm Jeffrey Rebke. I live in Navarre in Holly by the Sea. I voted for you, and I'm very satisfied with your performance thus far. However, I'm standing here not with a question, an observation that I just want you to file away. I think people need to support our president. And I'm talking about the rhinos, and I look at ABC, and I consider them treasonous, for God's sake. And I hope you and all the other conservatives will continue to support Donald Trump, even though he's got a lot of rough edges. He is our president. I also support PAC SEAL team that seems to be bringing in conservatives. Again, sir, thank you for your service in Congress, and that's my comment is all.
Great. Thank you for your kind words, sir. That means a lot to me. Thank you for coming out. 111? Who had 111? And then next in the queue, 108. What do I got to do?
Good evening, Mr. Gaetz. As a sibling of two females, I had two sisters who I had to rescue from shelters due to domestic violence. And as a doctor of children who have been abused, my main concern, sir, is this culture that we have that there seems to be no endpoint to gun violence in our country. Now, I respect everybody's right when they want to follow what they want in terms of hunting and stuff, but my plea is how many more siblings do I have to rescue, and how many more children do I have to examine who've been victims of abuse? What is your endpoint, and what are you supporting in terms of people who are able to obtain weapons? Because my concern is there seems to be no endpoint, sir. That is the only type of rule that does not seem to have any kind of common sense control. We're all asking, please, just for common sense control. You have a bill that you have passed about the concealed reciprocity. I, as a business owner, sir, as a physician and as a sibling who have seen my sister suffer from domestic violence, I'm very concerned. Please reassure me that this is not going to be the bill that you would carry, and I want to see an endpoint to this non-common sense type of legislation.
Thank you. I think this is your second town hall in 2 weeks, so thank you for your dedication. I'm very grateful. I absolutely support reciprocity for concealed carry permit holders. I don't think the Second Amendment ends at the state line. And I am hopeful that we won't allow the actions of criminals to impair the rights of law-abiding citizens. You know, concealed carry permit holders in the state of Florida are 8 times less likely to commit a crime than members of law enforcement. You're dealing with a highly effective group of people when it comes to following the law. And so I'm not going to impair the rights of people who want to follow the law because there are too many people who don't follow the law. Now, I do think there are some common sense things that most people could agree on. If we have laws on the books that we have no mechanism for enforcement for, we should review that. We should be able to enforce the laws we have on our books. And this Las Vegas shooter broke the law. And we didn't have effective tools in place to stop him from breaking the law. And we should have bipartisan agreement at looking at that and seeing that it doesn't happen in the future. The other thing we should work on together is we should make sure that people who have serious mental illness do not have easy access to firearms. You know, no one thinks that's a good idea. And as I mentioned the last time this question was asked at our last town hall, I worked together with a liberal Democrat from South Florida and the NRA and Moms Against Gun Violence, or the Newtown group, any group that we could have that was a stakeholder. We got them at the table when I was criminal justice chairman in Florida, and we passed a bill where you can't just walk out of a mental institution and go home to your arsenal. And that's not fair to law enforcement when they're checking people out of the mental institution and they don't know what's going to happen when that person goes back to their home. So we can have, I think, common sense discussions about how to keep guns out of the hands of people who are mentally ill But at the same time, we cannot conflate that with the deprivation of constitutionally guaranteed rights for our law-abiding citizens. Right. I think we had 108 next. 108?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, great. Hey, how's it going, Greg? And after finally, 088. I got out of that little batch. 088 is next.
This is for real. I didn't make it up. So yeah, I actually got to do this. Oh, you okay? So I'm Greg Penglis. I'm the morning host on WEBY.
Shameless plug.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, because we've talked every Tuesday. We have a problem in this country, and the problem is the federal judiciary. A federal judge is now more powerful than the president because they can take any policy, they can put an injunction on any law, they can take anything that you do in Congress, and just one judge can say, I don't want that. And then it's stopped, and the president has to go do a lawsuit and all kinds of things to get their policy back. What are you going to do in Congress to put the federal judiciary back in the constitutional box of Article 3, and so that they're where they're supposed to be handling cases and not making law?
Amen. Great point. Thanks, Greg. Thanks for being here. One, I support term limits for federal judges. I don't think that those should be jobs for life. I think that just like I support term limits in Congress. I think new blood, I think a fresh perspective, that is a good thing, and hopefully that could be something that would be bipartisan. Second thing, Greg, I don't think Congress has effectively utilized its Article 1 powers. You know, when a judge breaks bad, when they break the rule, not when you disagree with their decision, okay? That's meddling. But when someone fundamentally says that they're not going to follow the law, we have impeachment powers. And we don't use those nearly as much as we should. I serve on the Judiciary Committee, and so here's my ask to all of you. If you see circumstances where federal judges aren't just making decisions you disagree with, but are flaunting the Constitution, please let me know, and I'll use my role in the Judiciary Committee to ask what our procedures are to initiate impeachment proceedings. By the way, here in Florida, our legislature's doing that, finally. We had judges who had harassed people, who had publicly said they were treating people differently because of their race, who were running side businesses out of their chambers corruptly. And you know what? When we threatened to start impeaching them in Florida, there was a big wave of resignations. And so sometimes making sure that everyone knows that you're utilizing your power under the Constitution can have a very antiseptic effect on the system. Great. So 088 is our next commenter or questioner. 088. And after that, I have 077. I don't see 088. Do we have 077 here? Step right up, ma'am. And then after that, let me try to get one here from the bottom. We've got 078. I just can't win. What a night. Thank you for being here, ma'am.
What's the matter?
Pleasure to meet you, Congressman.
Nice to meet you.
My name's Joni Parks. Congressman Gaetz, first off, I'd like to thank you for your efforts regarding medical cannabis in our state and our country.
Yeah!
Your support for a national standard for medical cannabis, as well as your efforts with the 2014 Compassionate Use Act, evidence your concern for patients and the medical options available to alleviate their suffering. Your work with those like House Judiciary Committee Chairman Bob Goodlatte in Virginia to get these goals accomplished on a federal level are applauded. Congressman H.R. 2020 to reschedule cannabis to Schedule 3, co-sponsored with Representative Soto, shows that you are aware of your words, lies, falsehoods, and mistruths about the effects of cannabis that have supported the continued errant Schedule 1 classification of cannabis. The financial, banking, medical research issues associated with this classifications need to be corrected and they need to be cured. Those efforts are a great start in the right direction here, and I thank you again. Today's cannabis is a genuine medicine, as it has been for millennia. It works, plain and simple. Tens of thousands of people in Florida, 60,000 plus as of this morning, have been receiving a new lease on life as they discard the myriad of opioid-based medications they've been prescribed by the medical community. This act alone has been a step forward to solving the opioid abuse epidemic and the tragic and needless deaths resulting from that abuse. However, some of our elder residents are still being marginalized and discriminated against, as evidenced in Pasco County with the Zephyr Hills Health and Rehab Center, with federal Medicare funding cited as an underlying concern for their refusal to allow the patients there to use legally prescribed medical cannabis. All of the concerns that plague the assisted living facility industry in this matter can be followed to the money source. The federal scheduling of cannabis as Schedule 1 is the problem. To deny this segment of our population access to legally prescribed medicine is shameful and it's just wrong. The Nursing Home and Assisted Living Facility Residents Bill of Rights proposal for the 2018 ballot is definitely a step in the right direction there. And that's what we're talking about. And please continue, Congressman Gaetz, please continue to champion the rights of our elderly with your efforts in cannabis legislation, both on a federal and state level.
Great, thank you.
My question to you.
Oh, this was the lead up.
My question to you today is, Congressman Gaetz, what can and will you do to continue this fight for human and patient rights regarding medical cannabis and rescheduling cannabis on a federal level to Schedule 3? What can and will you do to champion sensible legislation and regulation of the cannabis industry in our state and country? Congressman, you are helping save lives. You are doing it. And thank you. And improve the quality of life for tens of thousands of people, including many legally prescribed in our county in Northwest Florida. Please continue to open discussion, Congressman Gaetz, from all sides of any political aisle of legislators and representatives, and promote nonpartisan and sensible regulation. Myself and many others, such as Gary Stein, we thank you for your efforts and for your openness to consider bold and effective legislation in the future, and for allowing this time today to address the concern.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments and your question. When I first introduced Florida's first medical marijuana law in the state legislature, my dad told me I'd gone one toke over the line. And I got a few odd looks at First Baptist Church in Fort Walton Beach. But, I'm a libertarian-leaning conservative Republican, and I will never believe that the role of government is to stand between people and something that could help them. That's not right. That's not what government should do. So here's what we're working on. I don't think we need a pot shop on every corner. I don't think that we're going to end up with that. But it is ludicrous that the federal government makes it illegal to do research into medical cannabis. Why would we ever want to make research illegal? Why wouldn't we want to unlock every cure and every opportunity to help people? Somebody I've got to thank who's not with us anymore is the late Senator Greg Evers. When he was in the state legislature, he saw before anyone else the impact that medical cannabis could have on some of our veterans who struggle with debilitating pain and very frequent, very severe PTSD. And he fought for those folks, and he won for those folks in Tallahassee. In Washington, we have a system in place where when those very veterans go to the VA isn't even allowed to tell them what medical cannabis options are available in their own states or in their own communities. We have a gag order at the VA where federally approved clinical trials aren't even disclosed to the veterans who would qualify for them. So you've got the researchers saying, give me more veterans so I can find out what helps and what works. And then I've got the VA refusing to tell the veterans about what's available. No one would run a business or a hospital like this. I want to break those walls down, and I want to follow the science. Research should be legal, and in this great federalist system we have, where different states are allowed to govern themselves without an oppressive hand of the federal government, I believe cannabis policy should be left to the states. And let the states innovate and try and fail and adjust. That is the system that our Constitution promises, and it's the system that people who are suffering deserve. 078. Oh, yes, sir. And our next one will be 118. I'll hold it for you.
Oh, okay. I was going to mention term limits, but that's already been discussed. I also am interested in English language. I believe that about 85% of people support the government doing business only in English. And would you support an amendment or a law that requires the federal government to conduct its business only in English?
I would. I don't think it would pass. Did you know in Florida, English is the official language?
Yes.
And did you know that after the voters put in our Constitution that English is the official language, that the legislature never took action to actually implement that amendment?
Well, 30 years ago, I was working in Miami, and my wife came down to visit me, and she was astounded to see signs in windows, English spoken here.
Yeah.
And I was in,
That would be the Hialeah neighborhood.
yes, and I was in eastern Canada, Quebec, in a remote area, and I had to get a translator to help me function because they only spoke French. And I cannot think of a country in the world where has two primary languages that doesn't have trouble because of it.
I believe that in this country, folks should speak English, and I think that that's not a selfish desire. I think that it'll help people to be able to speak the language that is spoken in this country. That said, I think that learning new languages is a great thing for people. I've worked on learning Spanish. It's so-so. I did speak a little Spanish when I was at Hurlburt earlier today, but I think that the more we can open our minds to those things, the better. But when it comes to the working of the government, I would agree that should be in English. I'll give you the last word.
I moved to Germany back in the 1960s, raised my kids there actually. Part of it was so that they could learn German, another language, but I did not expect the Germans to conduct any business in English.
Great point, great point. Thank you for being here. 118 is our next ticket. And then we have 081. 081? All right, great. And then after you, sir, we've got 092.
Hey, my name's Tom Ash. Matt, I live on the Sound right down here, and I went to put a boat lift in. It took me 8 months to get a permit to put 4 pilings in the sand. It was because of seagrass. And I understand the environmental protection needed. The problem I had is I just wanted to set pilings, and I'm thinking about everybody that boats down here, and, you know, you're basically creating a sand driveway. The grass always grows back. What are you doing to help us reduce some of these, insane rates?
Well, my understanding, and you can correct me because you've just got the merit badge, most of those are state DEP regulations on seagrass, are they, or are they federal?
That was state DEP. There was also an EPA permit. There's an Army Corps engineer permit. There were, you go through, so you start at state and then you go through federal. But I'm using that as an example.
Sure. Well, here's the good news broadly. Since President Trump was inaugurated, we have repealed tens of thousands of pages of regulations. I don't know how many of them impacted the imposition of boat lifts and boat docks, but I think that one of the reasons why you see the economy growing a little bit faster and you see more consumer confidence and more investor confidence is that people are starting to believe that we're going to have a regulatory climate that is conducive to productivity. That's not there solely so that a bureaucrat can justify their own existence by creating 8 more forms for you to fill out with waiting periods so that they can continue to have their job. One thing I'd like to do is end this revolving door we have where government bureaucrats go and create the craziest system they can to comply with. Then they leave government service and become a consultant on how to comply with the crazy regulations that they helped write. That's a backward system. That constrains productivity. And since you mentioned the EPA, allow me to say, I think we should abolish the EPA. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't protect the environment. I think that we need to have strong standards in place, but the EPA was created in like the 1960s before we even had the internet. Before we had the ability to be able to downstream more authority to the local level, before testing technology and measurement technology was accessible to a wider array of people. Human talent, people used to think, the progressive theory is, let's get all the smart people together in Washington, and they'll kind of make decisions for everybody else, and we'll have a better society as a result of it. That hadn't worked. Talent is everywhere. Capability is all across this great country, and I think that if we got rid of the $8 billion bureaucracy that is the EPA and actually spent that money on seagrass, on habitat, on reefs, we'd do a lot more for the environment than paying a bunch of bureaucrats to write crazy rules. Yeah. 092. Great, and then the next one is 097.
I'm Ed Beef, and I appreciate all the support you've given Northwest Florida and to our country. I'm continually glad for the support of the military family readiness. I've worked in the government as military and as a civilian for 47 years, and that support is needed for our military families. But I do have high concern of the employment rate for our military, not only for the Air Force, but the Marines and Army. You see it more and more effect on the military families. So appreciate all the support and keep a continuous eye on our high rate deploying people overseas into high combat areas. Another area I have concern of, this is a comment and it's just overall question too. Do you think the administration, Republican Party, is doing enough to curtail the increase of sanctuary cities and not supporting the federal policy on immigration? I fully support immigration, but the rule of law is becoming compromised greatly, and it could have a national effect. Not thinking obstacles here in the future 20, 40 years from now, but if we had to call our national selective service system with this kind of trend, it could be detrimental to our country. Thank you.
No, thank you. Lot to unpack. On the issue of sanctuary cities, I don't even get why this is a debate. Are we going to allow different communities to pick and choose what laws they follow? That's crazy to me. When I was in the state of Florida, I introduced a bill that said if you decide to be a sanctuary city and not comply with the federal government and someone gets hurt, that person who's hurt or their family should be able to sue you individually, not the city, not go get money from the taxpayers, but to get money from the policymakers who think it's okay to thumb their nose at federal law. That did not pass. What I can say passed out of the House of Representatives this year was legislation that would create very real consequences for funding for sanctuary cities. We passed that bill overwhelmingly out of the House, and the United States Senate won't take a vote on it either way. And that's disappointing to me. And so I would encourage you to contact our two senators and ask what the plan is just to get an up or down vote. I got no problem losing. My problem is when we don't even get to take a vote on the things that are important to people. And so I think we should have to take a vote on that on sanctuary cities. Want to touch and make sure everybody really underscores your point about these deployment rates. We have the most frequently deployed wing in the military right here at in the Air Force right here at Hurlburt Field. These folks are on one-to-one deployments, and this is not what the Air Force was designed to do, to be on deployments this frequently and this rapidly. And we have some amazing patriots with courage that inspires me on a daily basis, but we're not doing enough for them. One, we don't give them the equipment that they need when they're downrange. Two, we finally now are getting better at giving them the authority when they are downrange to be able to kill the bad guys and break their stuff, rather than have to go call a bunch of lawyers at the Pentagon before protecting themselves and their unit members. But the final point you make, which was a huge focus of our day, is that the state of the military family is absolutely the bedrock of our readiness. You know, the best assets we have in the military are not our guns, they're not our ships, and they're not our planes. It's the people who make all that happen. And the problem we have, that we had early in this administration, is that the hiring freeze inadvertently left a bunch of jobs on the base for people who care for children, who run youth programs, who do all kinds of other important contracting work in the lurch. And they couldn't fill positions to take care of military families. So while I'm a big supporter of the president, I support a vast majority of his agenda, I wrote him a letter and said I disagreed with the hiring freeze as applied to people who are working on military bases. That's not the scourge on the federal government. We need to take care of those folks. And so I'll assure you this. I am the only member of the majority party who serves on the Armed Services Committee and the Budget Committee. And I will make sure in every budget and in every authorization and appropriation we do that we are making the argument to highlight the military family as the key component of readiness. So thank you. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to try to give shorter answers so we can get through these. 097 is next. 097. All right. 087. Oh, yes, sir. All right, great. And then after this gentleman, we will have 091.
The tax bill that's currently before the Senate increases the deficit by up to $1.8 trillion over the next 10 years. It also is likely to increase the taxes on the middle class by the next 5 years, while giving a huge decrease in taxes to the very wealthy. It also is predicted to cut $500 billion from the Medicare program. My question to you is, do you promise not to support the bill when it comes in conference if it creates huge cuts to the Medicare program?
Let me add, can I get this from you, sir? I want to make sure I respond accurately to your question. What is your source on the claim that taxes would go up for the middle class? Just so that I can research.
The Congressional Budget Office.
Oh, well, I've not seen that in the CBO report, that middle class families would see a tax increase. I've seen the opposite, but I tell you what, I never purport to have all the answers. So if you can highlight that and cite that for me, that would be incredibly instructive as it relates to my vote. You're absolutely correct about the claims about the deficit, and that concerns me. I don't want to participate in generational theft. The question is whether or not we've got the guts in Washington to actually cut spending. And that's what I'm going to fight for, whether this bill passes or not, because you're right to be concerned about the deficit. On Medicare, I don't think the problem in the Medicare program is that we don't have enough money in it. I think the problems in the Medicare program deal with utilization, a whole heck of a lot of fraud, and at times the provision of Medicare to people who are very wealthy. I mean, my parents, for example, get a Medicare benefit. And if they were here, mom and dad would argue, well, we paid into that program and we deserve to draw out of it. Well, look, I mean, that's going to be a fascinating academic argument when we lose this country to generational theft and rising deficits. So I would means test Medicare for people who've been very successful, like my folks, and I would try to direct more of that to the more efficient provision of health care. We spend so much time fighting about these different entities that pay for health care, private insurance companies, Medicare, Medicaid, and it's crazy to me that we don't spend that same amount of time figuring out how to actually lower the cost of health care by having mid-level providers do more, by not having drug companies spend billions of dollars in advertising to jack up drug prices, and also ensuring that people have got more competitive choices in their providers. So I'll give you the last word.
Okay. If you turn Medicare into a means-tested program like Medicaid, it is almost certainly to be cut for those of us who need it.
Why is that, sir?
Because your party strongly opposes Medicaid.
Yes, true.
Well, I'll have to agree to disagree with you on that. I think that the Medicaid program that I oppose is a program that is driven entirely by the federal government and that deprives us of the ability to innovate at the state level. I feel about healthcare a lot like how I feel about education. I don't think that we need a federal government telling every doctor or every teacher or every hospital or every principal how they have to run their system. We ought to have different people trying different things, and some things will work and some things won't, and best practices will emerge and they'll be copied. That is the federal system that we live in. I tried to make some reforms to the Medicaid program in Florida when I was a legislator. I thought that we should have work requirements for Medicaid for people who are able-bodied childless adults. And people who don't want to work could at least meet that requirement by volunteering somewhere and pitching in and helping out. And unfortunately, when we had a group of legislators that wanted to do that wanted to have work requirements, volunteer requirements, the federal government said no. They said, if you do that, you won't be eligible for any more federal drawdown. That's crazy. We need the ability to innovate and be flexible, and I think that'll yield better healthcare outcomes. Thank you for your question, and thank you for being here. 091. 091? All right, we'll just keep rolling. How about number 100? Step on up. And then after number 100, we'll have number 085.
This morning, I'd like to know where we're at on the carry permits to be where you can see your weapons, not concealed. I know you can get concealed, but I want to know about open carry, because I think open carry would be a good idea. And I think that most people that are honest and obey the laws are not going to break the laws. And if you deny us the opportunity to have these kind of permits, then you're letting the criminals have their way with us. And I think everyone should have the opportunity. I know that in certain states you can walk into a Walmart with a shotgun on your shoulder and there's no problem. But also there's not going to be any problem in that store either when they know that there's somebody there to defend them. And I think that open permits in the state of Florida should be just like Texas, and you should be free and unafraid and be able to go out at night and not worry about going to Walmart as a woman, which I've known 2 women in Navarre area that have almost been kidnapped in the Walmart parking lots. And if it had not been for their concealed carry, they wouldn't be alive today because they would have been drug into cars. However, if you have an open permit, especially for women, that'll make someone think twice before they try anything with that woman. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. I absolutely support open carry. I think it's ludicrous that the government is telling us how we have to exercise our rights. These are our rights. They belong to us. They're not given to us by the government. They are inalienable. They're part of who we are. I sponsored the open carry bill in Florida, and here is the approach that we took. We took the states that allow open carry, which, by the way, did you know that there are 45 states in America that allow some form of open carry? We're one of only 5 that doesn't. I think it's like New York, Illinois, Florida, New Jersey. I think South Carolina was the weird one that was on there. So I want to join the majority of the country that allows open carry. Here's the interesting data, and this isn't data that I've developed. It actually comes from the Department of Justice Bureau of Crime Statistics. In states that allow open carry, violent crime is 23% lower. The murder rate is lower. The armed robbery rate is lower. And so look, I'm not saying that that's solely because of open carry. I think there's a lot of different factors that impact the crime rate. But, you know, you certainly can't make the argument that open carry increases violent crime. It's lower in the states that have open carry. Kind of keeps folks polite. I would also say that long guns would not be permitted for open carry under what I've proposed, because I proposed a bill that said if you're a concealed carry permit holder, you can openly carry. That ensures the training, the background information that we would want to have, and you cannot get a concealed carry permit for a long gun. So this would only be for pistols. I also want to thank law enforcement. We got excellent feedback from law enforcement on this bill on the need for retention holsters and some other important stuff that ensures that we don't just in a way that we wouldn't expect to create an unsafe environment. Thank you for your question, and thank you for your advocacy for open carry. Next, 085. Oh, great. Good to see you again. Hold on, let me get the next ticket so we got somebody ready. 126 will be our next one.
It's good to see you too again, Matt Gaetz. Last week you were at town hall in Pensacola, and I'm taking notice of the effort you went to about the preservation of policies that are supposedly in the bill. But I want to point out something right here. That last week, right here, under subsection A, you claim that there are protections here in Navarre for preservation and conservation. Do you still hold to that? Do you truly believe that there are protections in the bill for Navarre? Because I've got right here the bill that you were reading from that says there is not protections there.
No, there are protections for Navarre, but let me be clear. I would support all of these protections that exist for Escambia County. I would support them for Navarre Beach too.
But they're not in the bill. You said they were in the bill.
Well, no, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, what I said is that this... Ma'am, I'm going to give you...
And this is not.
Okay.
This is not in the bill.
I'll give you the opportunity to talk, but then you have to allow me to respond. Otherwise, this just becomes a shouting match. So, regardless of what... I mean, there are protections in the bill. Absolutely stand by that for Navarre. Those protections are... I'm sorry, ma'am, you have to let me respond, and then I'll give you the last word. There are protections in the bill for Navarre that are consistent with the protections that exist in the status quo. There is a false information that has been spread that indicates that there's been federal protection over this land. If 3 members of the Santa Rosa County Commission tomorrow voted to allow every single square inch of our beach to be built, there's nothing that would allow the federal government to stop them today. And so we maintain those protections that exist now. There's no change. However, this is what the Escambia County Commission came up with, and I have no objection to it. And earlier today, at another of our events, a Santa Rosa County Commissioner stood up and said he's going to introduce a motion at the next meeting to include this for Santa Rosa County, which I totally support and agree with. So all of these protections, I think, should apply to the entire beach, but there's nothing in the bill that erodes a single protection today. Anything else is inaccurate. I'll give you the last word.
Okay, I beg to differ with you because you said that there were protections here, but there are not. I'm very clear. It's on subsection A under Escambia. Also, Senator Nelson came to the conclusion that the protections were not here in Navarre, and that is his reason, and that would allow for the pass to be cut. The bottom line is the citizens of Escambia County were deeded the property by an act of Congress in 1947 to remain public beaches. If this is overturned, but thank goodness the bill is currently dead. Are you going to reintroduce the bill? Are you going to reintroduce that bill?
Well, I'll always fight for equity for people who are currently being double taxed. I don't think that's fair to people to be treated in a system where they're the only Americans in the country that don't that have to pay property taxes on land they can't own. But thank you for being here.
You know what? Let me tell you something about it. They knew what they were getting into when they leased out there. They knew it ahead of time. Yeah, no, I'm not going to sit down.
086? Do we have 086?
You had a good argument, but when you get like that, you lose.
Okay. All right. I'll call another one.
Oh, it's right here.
Okay, step right up. This is 085.
You just had our way.
Sure. Nice try. I respect the effort, though. I gotta say, it's pretty. It's nice.
She was 085.
098.
Oh, wait a second. I was 085. She's 086.
Well, ma'am, you got your chance.
I know, but she's her.
098.
What the hell number did you call?
Okay. Do we have 086?
Yes.
Okay, great. Step on up. 086.
You need to improve the public education system, especially math. Especially math.
This is still 085.
No, it's not.
It says it right here, 085. Do you have 086?
I was 85.
Well, you can't use the same ticket twice.
I'll wait.
Okay.
I don't mind.
All right. 098 was our next one.
Hello, Congressman Gaetz. I'm a realtor and a homeowner here in Navarre. And I have some concerns about the Tax Cuts and Job Act. Part of it was already spoken to earlier, but the National Association of Realtors calls the tax reform package a tax hike on many middle class homeowners, and says it would also lower the property values for all homeowners, including those in our local military community. The Tax Cut and Jobs Act was passed along party lines and was approved entirely by Republicans. Although several members of the party joined the Democrats in opposition, and I'm a Republican. So it's projected that the increase in federal deficit is $1.5 trillion over the next 10 years, and cuts to top corporate tax rates from 35 to 20%. To pay for these other measures, the bill would eliminate or curtail most itemized deductions, except those for mortgage interest and charitable contributions. The deductions would be limited to for mortgages up to $500,000, which is half of what the current limit is, and property taxes deductions would be capped at $10,000. The Senate bill follows the same structures of the House bill, but makes significant changes, among other things. It makes no direct changes to the mortgage interest deduction, but it eliminates the deduction for all state and local taxes, including property tax. So sometimes something is still being taken away from the middle class homeowners. It certainly appears like the middle class homeowners will see their home values fall if this proposal moves forward, while large corporations walk away with the bulk of the tax cuts. I recently heard talk about on the television now, take it or leave it for what it is, but the corporate taxes would result in approximately $4,000 increase in wages. Somehow, I find it hard to believe that those savings will benefit anyone but the shareholders. I understand the reduction of corporate taxes is designed to stimulate job growth, but I believe that before we cut their tax rate by 15%, we should see how it will be used. Why not reduce from 35 to 25% and allow the rest of the distribution to other controversial issues that will do more to help middle-class Americans? If job growth is going to be expected, Congress could revisit the remaining 5% at a later date. I understand the Republicans want to get a win in the books before the 2018 elections, but just like Obamacare, this sure looks like big government is telling little mom and pop what is good for them and not asking them what they need. Your comments, sir.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Let me start by saying some of the arguments made by the National Association of Realtors do have merit and should be considered in the final product. So please don't take my comments to be dismissive of those concerns. I think they're legitimate. I really do. Here's where I would take some exception. It appears as though the information you got about which deductions stay and which deductions go may not have reflected the last amendments that were made on the House floor. There were a few others that were added in, and one that was added in was the $10,000 acceptable deductibility for state and local property taxes. Not for all state and local taxes, but for state and local property taxes. One of the reasons I believe the National Association of Realtors opposes this tax cut is that there are people in high tax states who will not get to take massive deductions that they're eligible for now. That's absolutely true. We're in the lowest per capita state tax system in America. And one of the reasons I support the bill is that I'm tired of Floridians subsidizing the deductions in high tax states. You know, I don't think that if in New Jersey and Illinois and California they want to keep raising taxes, I don't think we should keep subsidizing their deduction. Now, there are realtors in those places and they're members of the National Association, so I get it. I do. I think that at the end of the day, living here in Northwest Florida, where in a very short period of time, we've had exceptional real estate markets and we've had pretty soft real estate markets, the best driver is economic growth. I mean, when the economy's improving, things get better in the real estate market. And if things aren't going well in the real estate market, we're in real bad shape in the state of Florida. Truly, it's a major driver of our economy. So I want to take time to look at how the final version of this bill will affect home ownership, particularly for young people who are getting that first entry-level job and are saving up for that first home. We don't want to make that harder for anyone. I want to keep cutting property taxes in Florida. I think that's one way we can get there. But ultimately, cutting the corporate tax rate, raising wages, getting the economy moving again, it's my belief and my hope and my studied view that that will be the high water that raises all the boats. But you're right, we've got to get the details ironed out. And one difference between this and Obamacare is that in Obamacare, it was like one shot, take it or leave it, vote up and down, no amendments. Here, it is a more dynamic process. You know, people complained that the adoption credit was removed. I think rightfully I was one of the ones complaining. And so we got that put back in. People were complaining that there was no deductibility for state and local property taxes. And so we added $10,000 back. And so I think we still have some of these details to work out. And I think your points are well founded.
Are business expenses going to be part of the deduction? Because a lot of business owners here.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the most exciting things for small business is the fact that you'll get immediate depreciation. I mean, when I talk to small business owners about this tax bill, the thing they're more excited about than anything else is that immediate depreciation, because what grows a small business is the ability to serve more customers. And oftentimes you need more equipment, you need more assets, and so to immediately depreciate those makes that a little easier. That's the most feedback I've gotten from small business.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Matt, she was 80. Listen, she needs to speak.
83.
Gay.
83?
Gay, you need to see her.
Thanks for being here. Let me go ahead and call the next one. The next one is 125.
Hi, Congressman Gaetz. My name is Karen Owen. I was born in Milton, and after 50 plus years, I came back to Florida with my daughter. My daughter was a medical marijuana patient in the state of Washington. My daughter went through 2 brain surgeries, and she was the first person in the world to receive proton radiation for her very rare brain tumor of 350 to 400 brain tumors a year in the world. I'm sorry, it's an emotional topic. We bought a house here in January, and we had every hope that we were going to be able to live here with our family. My father died. We had to stay away from him while my child was being held in Washington. Now my only options, with my child having become a medical marijuana patient in the state of Florida, I'm looking at selling the home that I just bought and losing $30,000 or more and taking my child back to Washington to live our lives alone. We're not allowed to live with our family. We voted for medical marijuana. I was really appalled when I went in and took her to the doctors, and they offered my daughter 2 medicine choices. One was purely THC and one was purely CBD. That doesn't work. There is an entourage effect, and that is necessary for patients like my daughter and myself. My child, her story has been documented. It has been syndicated all over the world, and I can't wrap my mind around why I can't access her medication when we're importing inferior medications from Canada. My daughter was on a medication in the state of Washington that is an industry leader. My question to you is, will you help me to see what can be done to get the medication that's necessary to keep my child alive?
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I'm so sorry you've had to go through this. And there is no defense for a federal law or a federal system that deprives a parent of the ability to use something that is working to help their own child. Any policymaker that tries to defend that system, I think, is deeply flawed. And so I am sorry that for a generation in this country, the federal government has lied to the American people about medical cannabis. And I'm not going to be a part of that. The federal laws that we have about Schedule 1 stop us from being able to ship a medical product from one state to another. That's a bunch of crap. There's no reason to do that. That's just so that a bunch of people can stay adhered to their antiquated dogmas. And I am so sorry that the inability of politicians in Washington to behave responsibly and view science is creating such a terrible circumstance in your life. What will help is if we remove cannabis from Schedule 1. If we remove cannabis from Schedule 1, you can get this in FedEx.
But my daughter is cured because of cannabis oil, and she needs that cannabis oil on a daily basis to keep the cancer from coming back. She had this cancer 4 times. Western medicine left my daughter to die. They had no options. We found the option that cured her. And so I can't wait for decriminalization. I have an 18-year-old child who spent 9.5 years fighting cancer, and she has every right to live here with her family. Why should we have to go back to another state and be alone?
You shouldn't.
And how can we be importing medications from Canada? And I can go online and order them from a Canadian pharmacy. Something has to be done. I mean, under the medical necessity laws. I mean, there has to be something that can be done in order to get these medicines here for these people. Because the woman that I met that was the doctor here had no understanding of medical cannabis whatsoever.
Well, and we in Florida, because we're brand new to this system, it took us a little longer to get our head out of the sand. We don't have the same level of competencies that have been developed in other places. So we'll have to do a little catch up. I'll offer this to you even though it is not nearly adequate. In a week from Monday, we're going to have a new medical cannabis dispensary opening in Pensacola. I know the company, and they have a wide array of product. You don't just get one choice or the other. They have different ratios of THC to CBD. But what's so frustrating is you shouldn't have to do that. You have something that works. And no parent should be forced to put down something that's working for their child because of a stupid federal law that nobody can rationally defend.
Especially when the people that make my daughter's oil have numerous other cases of cancer healed. My daughter is not a standalone case in this.
I tell you what, I would like, a member of my staff is going to chat with you when we're done. I'd like to learn more about your story so that I can share it with more lawmakers because, wonderful. Well, a lot of people need to know your story. I will personally share it with my colleagues on the Judiciary Committee, Republican or Democrat. I'll take anybody who will work with me on it. Right. Well, I am sorry that this has happened. And if we can get this bill passed to get this off of Schedule 1, you can stay in this wonderful place and you won't have to choose between the place you want to be and the daughter you obviously love and care for deeply. Thank you. 125? Do we have 125? Yes, great. And then our next one will be 099.
How are you? Thank you so much for doing this. And for everybody coming out and leaving your families to be here. It's great to see that patriotism. So I have two questions. They're related. I wanted to know what your position is on Roy Moore and all the allegations in our neighboring state. I don't know if you have daughters. Okay. I know you were at my son's school today and he fist pumped you and I saw you saw all these little girls. But we have a huge issue happening very close to us with all these now grown women that were children and that were sexually assaulted by the Republican candidate for Senate. And I don't think it's political. I don't think it's party oriented. But I want to know. I'd love to finish my question. Thank you. But I'd just like to know what your position is on that and that race.
Yeah. This was at my house. This was the subject of discussion over Thanksgiving dinner,
Of course.
and I got into an argument with my mother, which never goes well for me.
Of course.
I've publicly said, and I continue to maintain, I could not vote for Roy Moore.
Okay.
I would write in Mo Brooks, who's a conservative who I serve with in the House, and I am not. Look, we don't want to live in a world where just to accuse someone convicts them, right? And it's not the stuff Roy Moore has denied that creeps me out. It's the stuff he admitted to, right? Like when he's saying, well, I never dated a high school girl in my 30s without their mom's permission. That's weird to me, right? I mean, now here's what in all fairness, here was my mother's argument, and she typically wins. She said, Matt, this guy, I'll concede that he might have done some weird stuff 40 years ago, and I don't know which of it's true or untrue, but I know this. If Doug Jones is elected to the United States Senate, it's going to be easier for people to have partial birth abortions. It's going to be harder to get the agenda passed that you're fighting for every day. And so my mother said if she had a vote, she would vote for Roy Moore. That wouldn't be my personal choice.
Oh, my.
Actually, she'd be a lot better Congress member than I would be. But my mom would be. But I just couldn't do it. It's just an existential thing for me. I don't pretend to tell the people of Alabama how to vote. I think it's their state. I think it's their decision. If Roy Moore wins the election, I don't think a bunch of people in Washington should refuse to seat him. I think he should have a right to be there if he's elected. Personally, I would not vote for it.
So in that context then, how do you feel and what have you said about the Access Hollywood tape with the President Trump right now, which condones sexual assault?
Yeah. That's a good question.
Yeah, I think there's a difference in some very crass and very unfortunate statements and putting your hands on people. And I think that those are very different and shouldn't be treated the same, in my opinion.
The way that he talked in the tape, that's not something that you've done?
Oh, Mom.
I can tell you this. I'm very glad that throughout my life I haven't worn a microphone at every given moment, because there's probably a lot of things I've said that I would be very embarrassed by and that I would not be proud of.
Me too.
Great. 099 was our next number?
Harvey Weinstein.
099?
He's horrible. Oh, am I blocking you?
All right, we'll just keep on rolling. 097. 097? Y'all get red tickets? All right.
That's why I didn't mention him.
All right. 093. Right? All right. Yes, sir. And after this, we've got time for one more after this, and so our last one will be 109.
David Smith, and I'd like to congratulate you on your, you and Representative Jordan trying to bring Clinton and the Clinton Foundation up for criminal prosecution or an investigation. My question is about concurrent receipt for the military. As you know, the VA, whenever you retire, you get a rating from the VA. Those 50% and above get a separate check from the military retirement check. Those below 50% is taken out of their retirement check. What's your feeling about correcting this?
It's indefensible, and it's a bunch of garbage that you make veterans choose between their pension and their VA benefits. What I did about it is, since I'm on the Armed Services Committee, I introduced an amendment so that we could get rid of that system and have a fair system where people get what they legitimately earned, and my amendment did not pass. It did not have the support to pass. But I'm going to keep fighting on this because it is ridiculous to tell veterans they have to choose between their retirement and their VA benefit. So thank you. And thanks for watching Congressman Jordan and I. I enjoy being the Robin to his Batman. 109, our last question. Yes, ma'am. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us. My question is about the tax bill and the fact that the tax cuts for corporations are permanent without any attachment to them about what they're going to do with that money that they get. And yet for the middle class, they expire in just a few years. To me, why isn't it permanent for the taxpayer and then for the corporations that it'll expire in a few years if they're not doing what they say they were going to do?
Well, that is the Senate bill that you've described, and I don't think it's the right thing to do to have the permanent for the corporate and not permanent for the individual. I'd make it all permanent. Here's why permanence on the corporate side is important. If we want businesses to bring their cash back to the United States, to bring their intellectual property back to the United States, to make major investments in equipment and manufacturing facilities, they have to be able to plan out for that. And if there's uncertainty as to whether or not that'll exist anymore, it can retard investment. So you're right that we shouldn't be treating them equally. My preference is that we would make all of it permanent.
And my other add-on to that is, why is it that we're doing a tax cut when nationally it shows that very few people are really clamoring for that they're more concerned about their health care issues and immigration than they are about tax cuts?
Well, I don't think we have to choose. I want to fix health care. I want to have a strong border wall and have immigration enforcement and to defund sanctuary cities. But I also think that we got to get the economy moving again. If we don't grow the economy sufficiently, none of the rest of this will really matter because we'll have an eroding country. And so I think that Congress should be expected to chew gum and walk at the same time. And I think we should be able to solve these problems together. Now, I appreciate you being here. I'll give you the last word.
I also think that we have no guarantee that corporations are going to do anything other than buy back their stocks or give, bigger dividends to their investors. We have no guarantee that this 15% cut is going to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you all so much for joining us. It's been a wonderful day here in Navarre. If you've got other questions or comments, my website is gaetz.house.gov. You can communicate with us there for constituent service. You can email